So thank you, everybody. We are going to start so we can, if we start on time, maybe we can end on time. So we are starting on time. Peg, I don't mean to call names, but we are starting on time. That's wish fulfillment. Thank you. Thank you all for coming, the public and the members of this commission. The first order of business is approval of the minutes. There were, if you saw what Philip sent yesterday, the only changes I made was a capitalization, a comma, and putting in a positives, identifying people. Laurel Fay was identified as a speaker. I said she was of the Preservation Society, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, do we have a second? Okay, no discussion. Can I call the question? Everyone in favor, please say aye or raise their hand or both. Okay, thank you. The minutes have been approved. So the old business, to be brief about it, we did already approve the wording for the Moonshine Monument at the in Hampton Park over the police horse. There is one suggested change of wording. Instead of it being, it's in the final line, instead of it being approved or sponsored by LENS, whose acronym I forget, law enforcement something, it's actually now sponsored by the City of Charleston Police Department. Any discussion? Yeah, yes, it should be the very second page after the agenda. And again, the wording had been approved. It's just the name of the sponsor that's being changed. Do we have a motion to? Okay, do we have a second? Okay, as changed, as amended. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye, raise their hand. Any nays or abstentions? So I think it carried unanimously, Philip. Moving right along. Let's see so I do have a little bit of information on item 2, protect and respect the bodies. I do want to say that we did pass a resolution. I did present that resolution to City Council on January 10th, I believe. And just coincidentally, that was also the day that Mickey Rosenblum was recognized for her 41 years of service to this committee, and the mayor made it Mickey Rosenblum Day. So she was here in attendance. So see what you get if you stay on another 30 or so more years. So it could be your day too. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And so it is recorded if you want to see it. I did add something on to the end of my presentation, making it clear that it was not part of the resolution that we had passed. Having recently attended a meeting where someone called for and gave a history of there not being an archaeologist for the city of Charleston. I just suggested at the end of that presentation that we probably would not have had to make a resolution like that if there had been a city archaeologist in the city of Charleston. But I did make it clear that that was not our resolution. Right before I came, I did get an email from Anna Catherine Alexander at the Preservation Society. It'll probably take me 2 minutes. I can bring this commission up with more points as to what's happening there. The meetings are still ongoing. As you're well aware, Terracon, which is the college's firm used to do the exploration of the site, constantly has to update its program and send it to SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, which is the same office that approves, that does the plaques here too. So on their latest plan, SHPO has brought up a few points in their plan, basically saying that the plan fails to acknowledge that if this does take, there's language in there saying it may take decades to do. Has the college looked at the fiscal responsibility of when will it not be financially prudent to do this? That was one point they raised in it. Another point that they raised in it, and specifically about City of Charleston government. As in our resolution, we encourage City of Charleston government to follow all policies and procedures. Again, the SHPO office has called on the city of Charleston to, that they have the power to rule on this. And the fact that it's not part of the plan, the State Historic Preservation Office is saying that should be part of the plan. I promise just a few more. They also say in the plan that Terracon has submitted that it cannot be accepted as a foregone conclusion that the graves will be moved and there will be a building built. And finally, they do make a difference between the Community Engagement Council being a group that weighs in on it, but the project has still not engaged the descendant community. So there is an open meeting tomorrow night if people want to attend that, but that is, sorry, at some length, what's going on with that, the 106 Cumming Street. And if anyone has any questions about that, either from the public or from the commissioners, I'd be glad to try to answer it. I'm just a conduit for information. I'm not really the point person. Okay, seeing no queries, no hands up in the air, we can move right along to point D, the presentation of the Godfrey Lenning Hill Family Cemetery at Magnolia Park. We ask you, just because we are recording and people are watching, that when you do step to the microphone, as you have already done, you old hand at this, Donna Jacobs, if you identify yourself as Donna Jacobs, and proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Donna Jacobs, and I want to thank you for allowing us time on your agenda to update the History Commission on a very exciting discovery in West Ashley. Before I turn this over to Charlie Smith, who has done the heavy lifting on this matter, I would ask the Commission for indulgence to introduce the West Ashley historians. There are 6 of us, and tell you how we came to be here today. Charlie Smith, Diane Hamilton, Ina Boodle to the far left, right, Ken Meralda, and Grant Michaud and I form this group. Grant is not with us here this evening. We are a fun, collaborative mix and are focused on discovering, unwinding, and advancing the rich history of the lands west of the Ashley. We began as 4 working on Maryville. Then Diane received a grant and published her book on her community. From that, we just continued to meet and share information. One day, Charlie sent us a plat, and it's this plat that you see on the screen. It's kind of small in detail. And he asked us, do you see the word cemetery on this plat? We all agreed we did, and with that, a journey began into something quite remarkable. With this tease, I'm going to turn it over to Charlie, because he's going to unwind a very complex story for you about this. And there are 2 more graphics if you can't see this one. If I can step up. Is it okay to step up? I might be able to point out the word.
Forwards, if you want to play Carol Merrill. Oh gosh. Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'd like to give you a brief introduction to Lieutenant Colonel John Godfrey. John Godfrey was one of the original Barbadian investors in the 1663 Hilton expedition to explore the Carolina coast. 2 years after the founding of Charlestown, Godfrey moved from Barbados to the Charleston settlement. He was initially granted 2 tracts of land totaling 940 acres, and over the time that he was here, he served as deputy to Peter Colliden, Christopher Monk, John Yeamans, Anthony Cooper, and at times all of the proprietors collectively. He also served as deputy or acting governor of South Carolina in the absence of Governor Joseph West. I did it again, Diane. I'm sorry. So prior to, well, initially he lived on Peter Colleton's property on Wapoo Creek in the farm field area, down toward Wapoo Creek, where the Ravenel House is, the farm field house in that general area. Prior to the American Revolution, he and his descendants had already amassed about 40% of the land area of what is now Inner West Ashley. When he died in 1689, all of this land was inherited by his eldest son, Captain John Godfrey. Captain John Godfrey then died intestate in 1705, and the land was inherited by his son, John Godfrey. If you're noticing a theme here, it's because nearly every male descendant of Lieutenant Colonel John Godfrey had a son named John. And many of the descendants also had a Benjamin or a Richard. So these names, these three names are repeated so many times in so many branches of this family that it's quite a task to understand in genealogy who you're talking about when you're looking at these documents, because you have to look at who his wife was, who his brother-in-law, and all of these things you have to like triangulate every time you talk about one of these Johns. So John III, in an effort to distribute his father's property according to his wishes among the 7 children of his father, divided 2,068 acres of what is now West Ashley into 7 224-acre parcels and distributed them evenly among the children. Lot 1 fell to John Godfrey's son Benjamin, who died in 1734. In his will, he states, "I give, bequeath, and appoint 1 acre of ground, the same where the burying place of my family and relations now is, to and for a burial place for the use of the said family and their heirs forever." That's the cemetery we're talking about. In 1750, Lot 1, that had belonged to Benjamin, Lot 2, and the 70-acre tract known as Governor's Point became the property of Dr. John Lenning. And I'm sure most of you will know him as the father of meteorology and a very famous personality at the time here, and very significant in American history. And he also was the first to publish a major journal article on the effects of weather on malaria, which had some very significant developments later. John Lenning took title to this property in right of his wife, Elizabeth Godfrey Lenning. She was one of the children of Captain John Godfrey. The couple lived on this property until his death in 1760 and her death in 1789. This cemetery is almost certainly the burial place of the father of meteorology, Dr. John Lenning. They were actually living on that property from 1752 until 1760. It is likely the burial place of Colonel John Godfrey, who died actually in 1689, but their family was very closely associated with this property already. He had been brought from Barbados to work with the proprietors for the development of the proprietors' plantation. And this property was actually part of the proprietor's property before it went to the Godfreys in 1699. Captain John Godfrey and many of his descendants are now known to be buried at this cemetery, and that's why we're here today. In 2022, the West Ashley historians were having an informal discussion about a 1788 Purcell plat in the McCready collection that was marked Marshes of Wapoo Creek. We each tried to line the survey up with known landmarks, but it just didn't fit anything that was along Wapoo Creek. And, frankly, I had cast it aside for a while because it just didn't fit. So eventually we realized that the plat was mislabeled and that we were actually looking at the intersection of what's now Magnolia Road and Sycamore Avenue, where the schoolhouse is today. We also discovered the famous marking that seemed to indicate the word cemetery at an area that also looked like it might be present-day Magnolia Park. An 1826 John Wilson plat that we found, which I think we have a copy of here also, and we think this was probably a sales tool that was put together by the Lenning family after Charles Lenning died. It's very detailed, but Nick Butler and I were talking about this because it didn't include Lenning Island, which is where the later Lenning family cemetery was. And he called me and asked me what my thoughts were on why that island was not included in the plat. And I said, well, they weren't selling the island. They were selling everything else, so it wouldn't have been on the plat. But then I noticed that it also had the word cemetery in that little spot in the southeastern corner. So that 1826 Wilson plat is the last known reference ever made to this cemetery on a public document. With some careful measuring, manual overlaying of current tax maps, and eventually GIS georeferencing, it became clear that the cemetery had to be within the boundaries of Magnolia Park. So armed with that information, we called our friends at South Carolina Historical Rescue and conducted preliminary GPR testing at the site. Within an hour, 4 anomalies consistent with grave shafts had been located. And we reported this to Jason Kronsberg with the Parks Department so he would know what we were doing. And in a short period of time, we were able, with the assistance of Mayor John Tecklenburg, to get a temporary access agreement with the city to conduct more research on the property. In June of 2024, Dr. Luke Pecoraro, who is the Director of Archaeology at Drayton Hall, brought his brand new right out of the box satellite connected GPR unit to the site. And he located at least 15 more similar anomalies consistent with grave shafts, all oriented in an east-west direction. And he also located what appeared to be the wall of a masonry subterranean structure. With Dr. Pecораro's report, the first phase of our work had concluded that this is, in fact, the pre-1734 Godfrey Hill Lenning Cemetery. And we are really fortunate that this proprietary era cemetery is not only on public land, but that Magnolia Park is already protected under a conservation easement, which is now held by the Low Country Land Trust. The cemetery, however, is not specifically named as a conservation value in that easement because nobody knew it was there. The West Ashley historians believe that a modification to the easement and an historic marker would provide the best long-term protection for this cemetery. And we're hoping that our presentation today might lead to that at some point. And we would love to have your input on this and who we might be able to talk with to move this along and to get this protected. Because I can tell you last month when they put the new wooden fence all the way around Magnolia Park, all of the materials brought there, the lumber and everything, were dumped on top of exactly where we think that subterranean vault is, and everybody's cars were parked on the cemetery. And nobody knows. Plus, now that they have put the fence up, people in the neighborhood seem to think that it is a dog park, which it is not. The dog park is right across the street, so there's really no need for it to be a dog park. But we think that that this particular cemetery deserves protection, and we're certainly thrilled that it's already protected with the easement. But we think that it would be stronger protection for more people to know about it and for us to give it some acknowledgement and interpretation and do more research on it. I can tell you that several family members as far away as Chicago have contacted me and have come here to visit that site. And we've had lengthy discussions about it because they feel that they're very much in support of what we're doing, including if we are able to do similar to what was done at Anson Street, if we could actually do DNA research on remains in this cemetery. They are very supportive of that as well. And I think it's important that people know that up front, because I think people assume that maybe they wouldn't be, but this family is very interested in doing this. So that's kind of my presentation, and we are really grateful for y'all listening to us today and giving us the opportunity to present it. And I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has.
This isn't a question. This isn't a question, but I would like to compliment you all very, very highly. I've been on the commission a while, and this was probably the best researched and written presentation that we have received in a long, long time.
Well, thank you
So,
very much. And it is
I-
very much a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
Each of us has our own little specialization but
Yeah.
we are great friends, and we get together every month for breakfast. And oftentimes we get together on my back porch and sit and have a potluck together and just talk about what we're doing individually and together. So it's a fun group, but it also inspires us to do better work and to be able to use each other's skills to do better work. So thank you very much for that.
Philip, can we show that image that you were asking about? Just that other image that you, not that
So
one.
I've only got these two are the
Oh,
ones I've got. The other one I wasn't able to
So
get.
Which that unfortunately didn't translate in email. And it's one I recently found in the South Carolina Historical Society. And it is that 1826 plat that Charlie mentioned, and the word cemetery isn't even questionable. And I'd sent that along. Unfortunately, it didn't. These are large files. Sometimes they don't always get along, but I wanted to, when this one was, is it really cemetery? That plat lays right on top of this one, and the word cemetery is without a doubt there.
And the 1826 John Wilson plat, actually, when we look closer at it, it was even more faint than some of the wording on it, but there's actually a measurement from the property line straight out from that little inside corner. There's a measurement of 115 feet straight out from that. And if you look really closely, you can see it, but you really got to be looking for it. But we're just, we're thrilled that we've been able to do this, and we hope y'all will be too.
And green light, yeah.
Is the fence you mentioned around the entire park or just around the
It's
cemetery?
around the entire park.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the Benjamin's will of 1734 is the first time that that the cemetery itself is legally defined anywhere, because it didn't need to be. They owned everything. So when they split it up, he went to the extra effort of defining it as 1 acre, where his family, the same as where his family already is. So we know, I think it's safe to assume there's at least one generation before that that's already there. And it may be 2, but that's as far back as you have to go with the Godfreys. That gets you Lieutenant Colonel Godfrey.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's right on the line.
So my question is, were there any mutual space that the Lord proprietors acquired it?
Oh, yes. And actually, there was a gift to the Register of Deeds office recently that is hanging on the wall at the counter. That is actually a copy of the deed from the Native Americans when it was sold to the Lord's proprietors. So it was a sale.
No. Well, I hope that whatever documentation includes that.
Yes, yes.
That information and documentation. It's very important to know the origins
Absolutely.
of these properties.
Absolutely. And this may be a perfect site to explore a little more in depth, because we are shocked at how intact it is. We can't really find anything that shows that anything was ever built on it, and the property line hasn't changed since 1717. So it's really intact. And because of that, there may be prior artifacts and information that we can get from that site that also hasn't been disturbed.
Yep.
That's rare in West Sash.
River valleys are
It's
very
rare
often-
anywhere.
Thank you.
Angela?
Just a quick question, and you may have said this already. So when was it made into a city park?
The Albemarle School, I think, closed in the 80s, and then the city acquired what had been the playground, and that became Magnolia Park. And then the schoolhouse was sold privately, and it's now an event space. But also there's the garden. The Parks Conservancy has their offices in the schoolhouse at the site, and they watch that like a hawk over there. By the way, they know that we've been working on this, and they're really good about calling us if they see anybody over there. In fact, they called me about me one day. So
Thank you.
sure.
Dale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation to the Albemarle School and the Jewish cemetery, Where are we talking about this cemetery?
Right at
being?
If you can visualize the length of the playground behind the school building,
Sure.
there is a small building there that is also very important that y'all need to know about. This was a school this was a building that was used for a school for special education. And I believe it was the first in the state that was used specifically for special education. If you look at that building, it's immediately to the right of it and goes all the way back to the fence, back through the woods. In fact, we paid to have the woods cleared enough for us to get GPR in there. So it's a fantastic place.
Well, just nickel knowledge, my wife taught special education in that school. Yeah.
But we're very concerned about that building, and the roof is caving in on it, but the structure's still good. It's a concrete block building, and the structure is fine, but it is not getting the care that it needs. It had been used for storage for garden implements and things like that for the Parks Conservancy until the roof got so bad, but it would not be much of an effort to put a new roof structure on that. It's just a simple gable roof. So we need to look at that as well, because that's very important.
Who owns it, Charlie?
City of Charleston.
City of
owns it.
Charleston.
Yes.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you talk a little bit about the Revolutionary War era for that particular site? I was very intrigued with the information that came over earlier today.
You'll notice when you read through the more detailed report that there are a couple of sidebars in there, but they were important because they gave us dates that actually could be used to interpret the cemetery. And one of the most interesting was an article that came out in February of 2025 in the Journal of the American Revolution. And it was an article about a plan by Patrick Ferguson, the British engineer, Patrick Ferguson, 10 days after the fall of Charleston, had a plan in place to use existing structures in both in the more rural Charleston areas, but also in the backcountry of South Carolina, to adaptively reuse structures that were already there for fortifications. Part of that article had to do with some portable 18 by 18 log structures that he proposed that could be actually taken apart and moved to another site very easily. So he had some great ideas, but he had a very specific plan for the reuse of the house of Charles Lenning, which was the house at Hillsborough. And there is a sketch attached to that, to his plan that is not labeled, but it's pretty clear to me that that sketch is actually the house at Hillsborough, because it just has too many weird little details on it for it to be a prototype of anything. And it is clearly a Barbadian Charleston single house design. And he describes it as being one room wide with very large rooms, but the narrow end of the house was facing the Ashley River. And when you look at the sketch, the drawing is odd because the facade of the house, which would be to the north, is a gable end all the way up, and there's an exterior chimney complex that goes all the way up past the gable of the roof. On the southern end of it, it's hipped, and the chimney complex is back into the structure inside. So it's an internal chimney complex. So I don't think it's a prototype. When you realize that he's talking, if the narrow end of the house, as he described in his article, in his plan, was facing the Ashley River, then the sketch is showing that a piazza had been removed from the western side of the house, because the entrance to the house is halfway down in the center. And you can tell that they've removed it because they trenched all the way around the house. There were 2 rows of trenches from the house to protect it from attack. But But it's clear that the porch has been removed and that it was a typical Charleston single house design, which of course wouldn't have been used in the upcountry. They had, it wasn't unusual to have a central entry in an I house, basically, in the upcountry. That was pretty typical. But in the upcountry, it's the long side of the house that faces the street or faces the waterway. It's not the narrow side. And it's, to me, that sketch reads very strongly that it was likely the house at Hillsborough. But what's odd about that is we know that that house, we know, was there in 1717. And it begs the question, was that house the governor's house that was at Hillsborough? Because, I mean, if it was log construction, it had to be log construction or masonry construction because it had cannon on the second floor. And just to support the weight of that, much less the impact from, or the recoil from the cannon, it would have had to have been a very strong structure. But Charles Lenning was Dr. John Lenning's son, and he was captured at the fall of Charleston, and he was considered to be very dangerous because he would not take an oath of allegiance to the crown after he was captured. And they figured that he was going to cause trouble if they left him in Charleston, and he was taken to St. Augustine, and he stayed there until December of '82. So I made that point because it very easily could be that cemetery was either desecrated or, just they made a break after the revolution. We know, we're pretty sure that his mother was the last person buried there in 1789. But Charles Lenning built a mausoleum on Lenning Island off of Maryville, Ashleyville, between Charlestown and Maryville. So from 1805 to 1865, the Lenning family, their people were entombed in that mausoleum out there. But one of the things that we know from our research on Lenning Island and the mausoleum was that there was one article that just happened to mention that there had been a marble slab over the door, and the date was June 23rd of 1805. And we also know from a newspaper article that Thomas Bartholomew Bowen, who was a member of the Society of the Cincinnati and one of the founders of Scottish Rite Masonry, was very sick and was at Hillsborough and died there, and he was entombed there less than 3 weeks from the date that was over the door of the mausoleum. So that gives us a pretty clear marker for when the older cemetery ceased to be used by the family.
Any other questions?
Well, I would just like to, again, compliment you on this very excellent research that you've done. We're very interested in I think I speak for other commissioners as well. We're very interested in helping you in any way we can get this story out, get it certified, and get it distributed. I have a selfish interest with I'm also on the SC 250 Commission, State Commission, and we would really like to see the Revolutionary War part of this in all of the research that you've done with that. Make sure that it gets into our archives, and that we have another organization, SC Art, that is a trust that keeps information like this going forward so people can research it, can access it. So again, my compliments to you, and we're eager to support you, and we'd like to hear ways that we can help you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, it's been a pleasure to be here today, and we're happy to help in any way that we can.
That was going to be my segue, and anyone on the committee so what can we do for y'all, and what would be the perfect world of what happened? And again, lacking a city archaeologist. But like I said, I mean, y'all have driven this so far, if signage is given to us, we would certainly, obviously we've got the background. The one suggestion that I could give is, since the story is so dense, I would, and we've had issues with the commission, I would recommend not a state historical marker, which only has 27 characters per line or something like that. And many of y'all will remember the sort of markers that we did at Maryville, Ashleyville, with a variety of stories.
Yeah.
And that was through the city parks. And I guess with Jason Kronsberg gone, I'm not sure if there's an acting head or whatever, of city parks, but is that the next step that y'all are taking? It sounds like you've already
Yes,
worked
and
with them.
Jason's office is going to be right next to this cemetery. So he's
Oh.
away. But I also wanted to mention that what you all are doing in support of the city archaeologists, we just want to ask y'all to please, if we can get the city archaeologists, let's please try to make it citywide, not just downtown, because there are lots of things that are below the surface that are never going to be found or interpreted and will likely be lost if we don't have access to an archaeologist who could step in and help us with this. So it's important that that position be a citywide position.
Yeah, in default of a city archaeologist, the Charleston Museum, well, I see you've been working with Drayton Hall. I'm just curious if if you're doing more archaeology.
No, not yet. Actually, our temporary access agreement expired in 2024. And we have not moved to renew that yet because we wanted to make sure that we had gotten all of our documentation correct to a point. And we feel like we're there now. So we're ready to move into the next phase of this.
Yeah.
And we would love to have your help.
And we're here to help you. And Wilmot, did you have a question?
Very close, very close.
Some landing and their findings about the area, the general area.
Some of what we know is because of conversations that I've had with the archaeologists out there, but that was very early on in this process. So we know a lot more now than we did then. So I think it would be a much better conversation now, but I definitely think they need to be included in the conversation as well.
I would think so.
And I would like for the head of Geraldo to speak for a minute as well. He's responsible.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenneth Marolda. Yes, I did create the GIS map. I geo-referenced the old plat on our countywide GIS software, the parcel viewer, to figure out which parcel that cemetery was located on. But the comments I'd actually like to share with you have to do with your question about the archaeologist at Charlestown Landing, because in Avondale, which is right near this site, actually you can see the spot I'm going to talk about at the bottom right corner of that, the gray area, if you move over, yep, you see that little square? Yeah, right near your cursor, actually. That bottom right square was the home of one of the sons of John Godfrey. In 1672, right after the founding of Charlestown Landing, they noted that was the rallying point for the colonial militia, was that house. And so when I was neighborhood president of Avondale, we did a character appraisal where I traced the deed from my own house, which was at 1 Arcadian Park, right where that square is, all the way back as far as I could to the early 1700s. And what we ended up finding was that was the plantation house. It was right where my own house was, by pure coincidence, where we found pieces of tabby and brickwork that had shell mortar on it. And as you probably know, the tabby and the shell mortar was used very, very early on. And so I found it by accident. I had a friend helping me put it in a mailbox post, and he hit the tabby by accident. And so that's when we called the archaeologist from Charlestown Landing, Nicole Eisenbarger. She came over pretty quickly and confirmed, yes, it is tabby. And that it is very old tabby. She could tell just by holding it from the proportion of shell to sand in the mixture and the density of it. So the archaeologists there are looking at this whole site as kind of a corridor, irrespective of our modern boundaries of saying this is Avondale, this is Maryville, this is Ashleyville, this is Charlestown Landing, and trying to see it as a corridor that the early colonists would have seen it as, and the way that they would have moved through the land and used it. So we found many artifacts, little pieces of porcelain, beads, other things. Some are from a later time period, but some they do believe are from pretty early on. So it is all tied together, and they are aware of it.
Oh, that is incredibly impressive. Wilmot?
heavily African before it became changed. But the fact is that we can do a lot of exploration in African American studies through what you're doing as well. And I salute your efforts there and hope you will pursue that avenue in the research.
Yes.
The mixture of oyster shell and gravel, that kind of thing is typical of many of the forts on the West African coast. And they were also built by Africans. So this is something that I'd be very interested in exploring with you.
Yes.
So, good to meet you.
You too.
Yep.
All right, take care.
Mr. Chairman, just one final comment since we're speaking about this house. There is a house at the end of Farm Field Road to the west of the Ravenel house. And if you notice in the middle of it, it has a very high-pitched roof, and then it has probably 10 different additions that have been made to it over the years. My neighbor in West Ashley told me that he wanted me to come over and look at this house because his parents had owned it since 1975, and that the core of this house was said to have been a Lenning Godfrey family house, and that it is of log construction with a brick fireplace, central brick fireplace in the center of it, and nobody knows it's there. This would be a really easy thing to do to test the material that it's built from, but I've actually been in the house, and it's about 15 by 20, which is about the same size as the houses that were being built here that were the minimum for being considered improvements for you to actually get title to the property that you were granted. But this guy has lived in that house all of his childhood, and he crawled all under it, and they actually took the central chimney complex out of it in the 70s. The foundation, however, is still there. Everything below the floor is still there. But it's a house, it's something that we need to know is there, because somebody could walk in there tomorrow with a demolition permit and take the whole thing down. There wouldn't be a thing anybody would know about it.
From what I read in the paper, just the demolition of the Clemson agricultural station supposedly, and again, sorry to bring that up, but I thought the flip side of that was that there was going to be money for a survey of historic properties west of the Ashley. So one would hope that that structure would be part of that. And I would suggest, again, I'm not sure who's doing that survey, but I think sharing that information with the Preservation Society, whose scope is citywide and not just peninsula, could be very helpful to trying to, even with the Preservation Society, even, doing research and marking that, saving that structure too. It's an astonishing job that y'all have done. And I think, speaking for all of us, I think we're just in awe of it and are waiting for the next installment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah. Thank you all. Yeah.
I wanted to thank y'all again because if you haven't noticed, what I do is wrangle wizards of information. And to Mr. Fraser's comment, Diane just told me that the archaeologists have been in Maryville area because on that map that you see, part of that Hillsborough plat where we found the cemetery ultimately became the community of Maryville and Ashleyville. And Diane's on our team, and she's done a great deep dive and has written a book about this. So we are global as we can be in our local area. We have I think we have all the tools that we're working on. So thank you so much for your time and to listening to our stories, because this is just scratching the surface.
No pun intended, yeah. And to embarrass Diane Hamilton, many of y'all may know that she is one of the community leaders who is part of the monument program at the Gilliard Auditorium of using images, projecting images of her on on the trees there too. So we are in the presence of really wonderful people. Yeah, 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 yeah. So the next item on the agenda is something, again, we've been in contact, Mike Lyons and I've been via email. And Mike, it was your C of C email address that, forgive me if I spoke down to you. I was thinking this was a College of Charleston student, wanting to do a paper or something like that. And then I quickly realized, no. So if you'd like to step forward and talk to us about your proposal as well, thank you
Happy
and
to,
welcome.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to address the commission. And until December, I was a College of Charleston student. At age 68, I decided to, after retiring from practice law, I went back to school, and in December, I got my master's in history. And one of the projects that I worked on, in fact, my thesis, was on the city council that sat at these chairs during the 1870s in Reconstruction. And it's a very interesting story about the first Republican government that this city ever had, and a Republican Party that was largely run by African Americans. And it's an interesting story, both politically, a rise, a fall, and a rise again, and also the kinds of things that they worked on when they were in the city council. So I looked at the city council was run by the Republicans from 1868 to 71, and then 73 to 77. And the Republicans won the election, the first free election where Black citizens were allowed to vote in 1868, took office 1869, and ran the city and started off pretty rough. You guys are members of the Historical Commission. You've probably heard about the gunfight that happened in those council chambers. Well, that was that council, but it was two of the white Republicans who shot at each other. I assume everybody here knows the story. Yes? No? Okay. One was the uncle, one was the nephew, and they were shooting at each other. It's quite a story. And when they first took office and sat around this table, none of them had been in office before. I mean, blacks weren't allowed to vote, much less run for office. And so the first thing that you had to do back in the era of the spoils system was you had to give out all the city jobs, which they fought over for months. So they got a reputation as being very corrupt and incompetent. And in the 1871 election, they were actually defeated by the Democrats, it's an interesting story how the Democrats, who had been this exclusively, white supremacist, only the richest white people could participate, adjusted their strategy and developed a whole strategy in 1871 of ethnic politics. So they ran a German immigrant for mayor, and they ran a bunch of Irish immigrants for other things. They actually put some blacks on the Democratic ticket and defeated these guys. And if you look at that era, 1871, by 1871, a lot of the Reconstruction states were already falling back to the Democratic Party, which at that time, as you know, was a white supremacist, an openly white supremacist party. So when they defeated these guys in 1871, they said, well, we have redeemed Charleston as we've redeemed these other states. But in 1873, the white and black Republicans actually made a comeback and took back control of the mayor's office and the city council. And what I find interesting about that is I haven't been able to find a single example anywhere else in the South where a redemption was reversed. And these guys reversed it in 1873, and having learned on the job when they ran again in 1875, they won again. And for the only time they were actually endorsed by the Post and Courier, which was a very democratic newspaper. They had done such a good job that even the Post and Courier endorsed them for re-election, and they won. So these are for the Republican councilman, one white gentleman, Mr. Mackey, who's one of the two guys that was involved in the gunfight in this chamber. And what I find interesting is these guys were sitting at the same tables you are. These are the same tables that were used in this council chamber in the 1870s. There's no bullet holes in them because the guy that was shooting had had a tooth extracted that afternoon and had been pumped full of cocaine, and he was so stoned that he hit the ceiling when he shot his gun off. That by itself is a fun story. So I came up with the concept of a public history project to bring the history of this council to this building. You know, it's an interesting thing. There's history all over this room. And here's the council chambers, and there's no history of the council here at all. And I thought it might be a neat idea to educate people in the community about the first council in the city's history that had Republicans on it and African Americans, who at that time were one and the same. The chairman of the Republican Party was an African American. The chairman of the county party was. Most of the state legislatures were. And one thing that I found out when I was doing my literature review, I read all the great books about Reconstruction and a couple of minor mentions of the city council. Everybody was focused on the state legislature. And I understand it was the first state legislature that created a public school system, things like that. But even modern historians have not paid any attention to this. And I was a city councilman up in Connecticut before I moved down here to retire. And it occurred to me, you know, maybe historians are subject to the same bias that voters are. Because think about it. Everybody comes out and votes in the presidential election. Smaller number of votes for governor. And in the local city council, you're lucky if you can get 20% turnout. Okay? Even though this is the level of government that's closest to the people. They're the ones who, well, I was going to say plow the roads coming from Connecticut. You don't do that here. But pave the roads and make sure the water flows and provide police and fire. And 80% of the voters don't even bother to vote on it. And it occurred to me, maybe historians are the same way. They take the local government for granted. They don't pay much attention to it, which is why nobody's written about this. Okay. So my target audience would be people coming into this building with historical tours, or to come in and harass the mayor, or to come into a council meeting and make a statement or something. And might learn something. This is a historic structure. Tour groups come in here all the time. This is the second oldest active council chamber in America. The only one that's older is New York City. And so you've got a ready group of people who could come in here, and it would educate people a little bit about, counter to the history of the little, you know, the redemption of South Carolina, how wonderful the red shirts were, things like this, which is, this book is still being sold. I found it in a online site, is to educate people about, you know, you may have heard the history about how Republicans in general, African Americans in particular, in Reconstruction, are a bunch of corrupt boobs. But my research says, no, actually, they did a pretty good job running the city when they were running it. So my idea was to do something like what you have downstairs. When you come into the hall downstairs and you work away here, they have the panels up, which are about the history of this structure. What was physically here first, what's physically here now, how to develop, but with barely a mention of what actually happened in the building, what was done here. And so I thought maybe we could put up some additional panels highlighting, for instance, some of the key members of that Reconstruction Council. So as an example, Councilman Richard Kane. You guys are historians, I'm sure you know all about Kane, but this guy has an amazing record. He was the guy who brought to rebirth the Mother Emanuel Church. He served on this city council. He served in the state legislature. He was a judge. And there were a number of other very accomplished men like this on this council. Interestingly, the African Americans who served on this council had all been free before the war, which is an interesting differentiation. A lot of Black Republicans who served in the state legislature were former enslaved. But these guys were all businessmen. A couple of them owned as many as 20 homes spread around Charleston. Several of them were far wealthier than most of the white people who lived in Charleston. They were very successful businessmen. And one theory we've sort of kicked around is why that differentiation, and some people think that, well, these guys had such intense business interests in Charleston, they couldn't take time to go off to Columbia and leave their business behind. You know, there's no telephones. It wasn't a 2-hour drive in your car to get to Columbia in those days. So they focused on local government. And I thought we could highlight several of those significant leaders. The other thing that I thought would be interesting to do would be to highlight something that I discovered about that city council, which is that they were technology early adopters. I found several examples of technologies of the 1870s, which were state of the art at the time, that this council used in Charleston way ahead of many other communities, even though Charleston was still in a pretty impoverished state at that time, post-war. For instance, the harbor had silted up and they needed to dredge the harbor, and they retained a engineer who'd come up with this concept for suction dredging. First place that was ever used in the world was here. So normally when you're dredging a harbor, you have the big crane that, you know, comes in and pulls out material and put it in a barge. These guys used a steam-powered suction system where they put a pipe down, suck out the sand and muck and whatnot, pour it into a barge, and then take it out and dump it. And they dredged the harbor to 22 feet, which for the time was very deep, and it allowed the largest ships to come back into the harbor, which had been blocked. They also, you know, the 1870s was when cities were starting to develop municipal water supplies. Charleston didn't have one. People got their water off of cisterns. You know, it was water would run off the roof and you'd have a container and that was your water. So this council hired people and drilled a 2,000-foot deep well in Marion Square, which upon its completion, you know, it went all the way down into an aquifer, so it was underneath any ground that would get salt water intrusion. And it was producing 700,000 gallons of water a day. It was the first municipal water supply for Charleston. The other thing they did, which I think is kind of cool, is they installed the first electrical fire alarm system in the city. Now this is pre-telephone, but electrical power was around and there were telegraphs. And some inventor came up with this system, and only 4 cities in the world, they sold it in the United States and Europe and other places. Only 4 cities in the world installed this before Charleston did. So maybe a year or so after he invented this system, Charleston had put in 27 of these boxes, eventually expanded out to 200. And it's literally, these things would be put on poles at the corners of buildings, and if there was a fire around you, you'd break the glass, pull the lever. The machine inside of it would then send like a Morse code signal out over the wires to the fire headquarters. If you see the picture on the right where there's the smaller box and then that glass contained thing, there was a ticker tape in there. So when the signal came in, it would print out on the ticker tape a Morse code pattern, and the fireman had, you see in that picture, there's a framed thing up on the wall that would show each pattern with the name of the location of the box. So when you saw that pattern, you know immediately this is where we got to go. And this was a huge thing because you remember Charleston had the huge fire in 1861. Everybody knows about the Chicago fire. Part of the problem in those days was a fire would start and nobody had any idea where it was. You know, you found the fire by where's the shouting. And, you know, when you think of the example of, you know, Mrs. O'Leary's cow or whatever, whether somebody had been there 5 minutes later, they would have put the fire out. But because they got there a half hour later, the whole city of Chicago burned to the ground. This meant that within minutes now, the fire department would know exactly where a fire was and they could dispatch all the resources to that location. And you know, as I was reading the minutes of the council meetings and newspaper coverage, it was interesting that the Republicans in those days were all into infrastructure, you know, internal improvements and everything, and they were pushing these things through, and the Democrats kept attacking them as you big spenders, you're wasting our money, why are you wasting this money on wells and fire alarm systems? But they did it anyway, And I'm sure, you know, if they were alive today, they'd be using AI systems or something. But I was very impressed with the fact that this group who took office just a couple of years earlier is real rank amateurs politically, really jumped on these things and grabbed the best technology that they could at the time. So the idea here is to you know, defeat this image that you have down here, one of the Thomas Nast cartoons about colored rule in a Reconstruction state, and say, no, it's not a bunch of idiots screaming at each other in a room. These guys did real good things here. And I thought that an ideal way to do this, going back to the slide, is you've got some beautiful blank walls out here. When I first came in, when I was thinking of doing this project, I was like, please don't have anything on the walls. And they're not. There's some nice blank walls outside of this room. And my thought was to put some banners about that council right out here. So anybody coming into the chamber can see them. You know, it's a good way of taking advantage of the historic site to educate some people about it. So when I was talking to Mr. Green, he said, you know, I'm sure you heard the phrase Rome being built in a day. There's a process here. So that's just a cartoon image over there on the right, but I'm like, is that Charleston's approval process right there? Because apparently that's a close approximation of what it is. What we determined so far is that everybody agrees the Historic Commission is a good place to start, because if this commission thinks this is worth pursuing, I'll pursue it. After that, the approval process is a little murky. We know the mayor and council have to have the final say, but the in-between part is a little murky. But where I've been directed by the city clerk is they think the recreation department may have some say over this, because they run, you know, a lot of other historic sites, parks and things like that may have historic. So my next step is going to go to the city recreation director and see if that is in fact the right place to go. Now, I checked back. Again, the city clerk was very helpful, and the exhibits that were done downstairs were done by Brockington and Associates back in 2008. And it was $80,000 for 19 panels. So I'm thinking about 4 panels, you know, CPI it up to today, maybe $25,000 to do it if the same kind of people put them together. So she said, so my next step, if you guys are favorable to this, is going to go to the recreation department, see if they are the right place to go, or find out who is, and then try to work with them to get a proposal which could then go into the budget process. Now, this city has a lot of money available to support historic related things. You got $11,400,000 from one tourism tax and $31 million from hospitality fund. So $25,000 shouldn't break anybody's budget if people thought it was worth doing. And that's where I would go next. So if you think it's worth doing, I'll go to the Parks Department, I'll get vendor suggestions, then I'll get to the vendors to generate a proposal, then go back to the parks to see if I can include it in the budget. If approved, then I work with the Historic Commission to design approval, and then the mayor and council for final approval. Hope the wait won't be too long. I found this little thing about the bear waiting for Godot. Hopefully it wouldn't take that long. But that's my concept, and happy to get any thoughts that you might have on this, and if I should pursue it further.
Well, my first thought is, boy, we lucked out today, you know, 2 and, you know, 2. And I think, you know, and thank you for the compliment of assuming that we know all of that we do, because I think y'all have really educated us on a lot of things, myself included. One, just for point of order, you know, because it's given to us for information only, we cannot officially act on it, you know, but I don't think you need our action, because again, you know, we strongly encourage you. I don't think, you know, again, we can't act on it. You know, I'll let other people speak, you know, they're interested in it as well too. And And I'm going to ask, maybe put Angela on the spot, since this committee was once called Arts and History, and Arts was broken off. And just before before the meeting, Angela was talking about, on this committee, former director of the Gibbs, there is an inventory. You said that those placards would be similar to the art and statuary which are in this hall. And so, Angela, do you have any light to shed on how that committee acted in the past?
Well, it was very much tied up with the renovation of this building in 2005. And you're correct with the panels that were put up downstairs because as I remember, the ground floor of the building was almost unusable. I mean, the public didn't go in there at all. And so making that open, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the Arts and History Commission approved all of that before the two commissions separated. I'm not exactly sure. But it was all based on the research that actually the architects had done, Evans and Schmidt, on this building when they did the renovation in 2005.
Okay.
So that made that possible. The installation in here was done based on what was the precedent, and that is important commissions of the city of Charleston, of which you see quite a number, and then the various mayors of which there are portraits.
Yep.
The Elizabeth O'Neill Verner suite that you see on that wall, actually the entire group of her images, etchings, were given to the city of Charleston, and they are housed at the Gibbs Museum of Art. That was in her direct wishes. And they're rotated out by the Gibbs every so often to protect the works on paper. But City Council has added portraits, as we know, over time. And I think this is a chapter, I mean, having worked with these works of art for a long, long time, this is definitely a chapter that is totally missing.
Yeah, I'd like to take a shot at adding it in.
And
Impressed with your direction for research. It's unique, and it has certainly a new twist on the Reconstruction period.
Yeah.
Contrasting state government with the local government, showing the kinds of industrious people who worked during that period to make change in what was a revolutionary situation.
Yeah.
And so I'm in favor, very much in favor of what you're doing, and would ask the commission to support it in writing, and with its favorable recommendation to City Council. The commission has not even asked for money for its own operation, so I don't know that it would want to ask for money for yours, but but I think it would be appropriate. Certainly think it would be appropriate, and maybe it would give the commission an excuse to ask for budget as well. So I'm hoping that you pick up that. I'm glad you're making the suggestion that you're making, and certain that it would be something remarkable to see. I'm just, well, the state should be interested in this because of its approach to Reconstruction. The state government should be interested in it. Certainly, the party structures, because it shows the evolution of the political parties.
Yeah.
Demonstrates the evolution of two major political parties, and you've got all kinds of supportive mechanisms. Reverend Kane, in his work with the AME Church, and with public education generally.
Yeah, there's a lot of other
I
things
mean,
that these guys did.
It's just full of themes that have to do with the public good.
Mhm.
And I think that it would be a remarkable thing to see installed somewhere here in city council buildings. Nina Sossaman does a public service announcement on public radio, where she talks about her first visit to city council chambers and how she recommends that people visit City Hall and City Council chambers because of the very history you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so you're just adding a new leaf and a new pages to that history. And I'm sure public television would be happy to help you expose the research to,
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. And I'm going to put Philip on the, I know Philip, in the past, there's been kind of a curator that sits up here, when tourists would come up and would offer information. Do you know if that position is still filled?
We don't have like an actual curator or anyone with historical background. We have my coworker, Patrick, who works in the clerk of council's office, who, he monitors the folks coming in as tourists and tour guides and that kind of thing. But no, he doesn't have, he's got a degree in public administration.
Okay, so historically, in the past, there was, the city did hire someone to sit here who would orient tourists to, the Washington portrait. And I think that was before 2005. It was before the renovation, or maybe even afterwards. I do remember.
He does.
Anyways, too. So it was my thought that if there was someone, obviously, that information could have been put in, if, anyone if there's a docent in here, doing that would be great information to add.
I think Patrick also is a registered tour guide, or however that works as well. So
if you can, you may have heard that Patrick is a registered tour guide as well, too, which, means some knowledge of the city, so could answer that. So sharing that information, since Rome was not built in a day, that was, could get the information there. And again, I'm sorry that it is a murky process, and I do think the clerk of council has been very helpful. But I would also suggest that maybe when you are following that route, of maybe even, there is the film downstairs that runs on a loop, which again only interprets the building.
Right.
And, if there were wanting to be something to interpret what happened in the building, possibly would certainly be more expensive, but a new film, could doing that, and this could be one part of it as well, too. So if we were to make a resolution, which we cannot do this day, we would have to put it on the agenda. So my advice is, free advice, free to disregard, that as you work and proceed with it, if it does come to the point that you think a resolution would help, then we would need to get it scheduled on the agenda 10 days before, and then we would vote whether to do a resolution or not. And so then, but if your discussions with people, and I guess it's the Parks Department, if they tell you that would be of use to you, please do come back to us. And thank you for the education. And just one other thing as well, there actually is a monument on Marion Square to that artesian well, which the language that we approved. And I see that you had Du Bois's book. Du Bois also wrote a novel called The Ordeal of Mansart, where he talks about the riot on the front steps of this building as well, too. So that's generally an untapped source.
Yeah.
Peg.
I like very much what you're doing, sir, but why limit it just to reconstruction? There's a wonderful story about that Washington painting. There's a great story about the Monroe painting. There are a lot of other things that have happened in this room that happened not during the Reconstruction period. And it would seem to me, if you want to do it, it should be all inclusive and not limited to a single period of time. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice.
Thought, Peg, is that there was a new film downstairs. It would be an incredible amount of work. Obviously, the chapter that you would be telling would be filled in already. But, I think that's something. So I think it could be a larger story than that. That the chapter that you're doing is incredibly interesting. But again, this is just mere thought that it may make it more palatable to city council and for funding to tell the entire story of the city council. And we've certainly got that chapter well documented down to you. But I guess we're saying, and again, forgive me for speaking in the plural, that if there's anything that we can do to, further that and prosper it, we are here and we do meet monthly. Yeah.
Well, certainly, I mean, if you want to talk about other eras, like if you think of the 1920s, the mayor and the council then.
Right. Our first city councilwoman.
That was the era where the bridges were built for the first time that connected Charleston east and west, and opened it up for economic development. And that was when the historic preservation process started, and the council adopted the first historic preservation and zoning ordinance anywhere in the United States.
Right, 31 in
So
this
you're right.
room.
There are definitely other eras of the city council where some pretty big stuff happened. This was the one that I did my thesis on, so that's the one I'm presenting. But there's more history to this council than just the
So I'm assuming because it's a College of Charleston thesis, it's probably available in Addlestone Library.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't know if there's any way Peg has
and
offered.
online. I
Right.
can send you a link if you'd like to see it.
I was going to say Peg has always been very generous about giving some of her books that she does about the Barbadian connection and stuff like that, to the city. So I was,
Kinds of things come to mind, and I love your idea. I think it's wonderful. But I really do think it should be all inclusive, not exclusive to just a unique period. Like for instance, the impact of printing the Shaftesbury papers. And outside of this door is a mayor that nobody even knows who the heck he is, who had it done. And he's one of the finest mayors Charleston ever had. And I could go on and on and on, and I don't know that much. And so that's just my thing. I
Yeah.
like everything you suggested, but I would just like to make it all inclusive because we have actually had a unique history in this city, unlike
So-
anything else. And
So
I'm
I think one way we could do that, Peg, is if there is a resolution, we could not single out one time period. I'm just saying if, like we did with the cemeteries, we talked about one cemetery, but we made it larger to say all cemeteries need to be protected. David?
I would like you to send us copies of your dissertation.
Yeah, happy to.
I've actually written an article on Daniel H. Chamberlain, who was the Republican governor of South Carolina. And so I didn't do anything at the city level, but I did a lot at the state level. So I would be interested to see
Yeah.
what you have to
There were
say.
a couple of interesting mayors then. Cunningham, I think, was the last Republican mayor before.
And Pillsbury was the first, but they are there. They are there on the,
Honest.
yeah, they are there on the list. So their names are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, you might be interested to know that my family owned Mr. Mackey's house for 99 years. So,
Wow.
I mean, there are lots of ties here in Charleston, and, well, I'll shut up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
was one of the reasons I
Yeah.
moved here.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
fell in love with this place from visiting a few
Yeah.
times, and I wanted to move here when I retired.
Well, that just shows that the come heres know more than the been heres. Often that is the case, convert. So any other questions? Any other questions? Yeah. So we thank you for your presentations. Thank you very much, all of y'all, all y'all. And again, we look forward to seeing both of y'all here too. We do have one other order of business on our agenda, miscellaneous business. Does anyone have anything to bring up? I have one point that I would like to possibly pass on. And Wilmot, sorry, I saw your hand. Do you have something to?
Mr. Chairman, I was sorry that, I wish that your presentation had been made last month, which was African American History Month. But we did not meet during African American History Month. And I regret that because I intended to deal with a subject that is very important, and that was the placement of the monument in Marion Square. I've been talking to a number of people around the city to find out, what people think. And generally, I think they think it's a bad idea that it's there. And we need to remove it as soon as possible. And we also need to clarify the position of the city regarding Marion Square. I served several years ago on a committee to erect a monument to Denmark Vesey. We intended that monument be placed in Marion Square because the old Citadel was there, and the old Citadel arose because of Denmark Vesey's conspiracy. And so I don't want to define it as a conspiracy because it was really an effort at human liberation. But the fact is that because of Denmark Vesey, that statue should have been placed there. When we approached the city about it, and it ended up with a compromise with Mayor Riley, that the statue could have a place in Charleston, but it would have to be in Hampton Park, which was near the new site of the Citadel and in a prominent place. So it was something that the committee decided to accept. Didn't go on to Marion Square. The excuse used for not putting it in Marion Square was, of course, the dodge that that the city doesn't really own Marion Square, that it's owned by this, the fiction that it's owned by this pre-Civil War unit. Dale knows about that unit. The fact is, the city owns it, city upkeeps it, public funds keep it going. It goes back to a time before that unit probably even existed, and the city has a history of governing it and with a special commission that deals with it from 1882. And so I want to ask that the commission place this item, a draft resolution that I received from some public officials who want to see the city show its true relationship to Marion Square, so that Marion Square, which is a very hallowed place in this city, since it is the root of our existence as a country and as a society, which was trying to expand freedom for human beings, we need to deal with that issue. We need to make sure that what is placed there reflects the spirit of freedom, and things that do not reflect the spirit of freedom have no place there or in any public hallowed space. So I'm hoping that the committee will act on this draft resolution at its meeting in April.
Sure.
And I want to give to the clerk copy of the draft resolution. Draft resolution does not address the issue of removal of the monument. The monument was placed there without any public discussion, without any proper consideration by public bodies. And as a result, it was a clandestine affair that should be corrected.
Sure.
And so I'm hoping that the commission will address that subject at our April meeting.
Right, sure.
And address as well the subject of
Right.
The Marion Square, reseating the Marion Square Commission, which would deal with which would deal with all public monuments and the history of that square.
Sure, it can be an action item at our next meeting. And obviously, if you could email that to Philip in electronic format, it would make it much easier.
I'll just give it to Philip,
Right.
and he can
Right.
place it in whatever
Right.
format he wishes.
Yeah, okay. But also too, I did have ready for today, and I think, the current memorandum of agreement between the city and the 4th Brigade. So I did ask Philip to print that out if that would be helpful to you, Wilmot. There was some discussion with the city attorney as to, and again, I'll just be very brief. We can talk about this at the next meeting, as to the 1882 agreement versus the the 1990s or early 2000s memorandum of agreement, which is the rule of the city. But anyway, we'll discuss that next week. Next month. But again, we do have the printout of the MOU if you are interested in that. And I think I emailed you that at one point too, just for your information.
You emailed a copy of
The memorandum of agreement of understanding between the city of Charleston and the 4th Brigade. I emailed that to you about a month or so ago.
I'll check my.
Okay, but anyway, but I think, Philip, do you have? Oh, maybe it's in our packet, duh. Okay, then it's in our packet, so sorry, so it's in this as well here already.
In the,
Yeah,
in today's
right.
packet?
So, yeah, so sorry, I did not know. But the only other thing that I wanted to bring to y'all is a question to you about a possible presentation to us. I mean, I think you see the citizen groups here today too. There is that murky kind of, if a citizen comes forward and wants to historically mark something, we seem to be the first one that we come to, but there is no, that I can tell, there is no protocol already in place. I do understand that the city of Mount Pleasant does have a protocol like that in place, that when a citizen does want, they have a historical commission similar to us that has a budget and does have a protocol in place if citizens do want to do that. I was just going to ask y'all if you thought it would be helpful to have a brief presentation from the city of Mount Pleasant to talk about what their historical commission does, if it would be useful to us. So maybe we don't have those murky things and we can maybe say, look, they've got a budget, but anyway, so.
We used to have a budget.
Yeah, so I just wanted to present that, as an idea for maybe the next meeting, if we could have a brief presentation on that. Okay, so I didn't want to foist it on people without asking, but again, it will be brief. And like I said, I was astonished to hear that there was a similar organization that had powers and would literally to help citizens. Okay, so is there any other order of business? Dale?
Mr. Chairman, it was not on the agenda, Marion Square or Robert E. Lee roadside marker, but it has been brought up and some comments have been made by Dr. Frazier specifically. And I do not want the record to simply show his comments without some response from me and others if they care to make it. Dr. Frazier, we've talked about this in the past, and I understand it's a real concern to you, but let me straighten out a couple of things. First of all, this is not on the agenda, so I hate to take up everybody's time, but it can't go unreplied to. And some of the comments were quite critical. First of all, the presence of the Robert E. Lee or anything else that the Board of Field Officers does on Marion Square, they're not fabrication and they're not fiction. The ownership of Marion Square is not a fiction. It's owned by the Board of Field Officers of the 4th Brigade. And for the sake of all explanation, I'm the chairman of that board and have been for up to a year now. I have 2 more years to go. But I've been a member for a while. This has been passed out. This is the current memorandum of understanding with the city of Charleston. I did not know it was going to be in your packet, but I have to respond to it because it's on the record. This pertains to the public use of Marion Square. It doesn't talk about the ownership or responsibilities of the city or the Board of Field Officers as far as what is displayed on Marion Square. It has to do with the public use of Marion Square, which has become very complex in recent years. It's very detailed about how applications are made, requirements for insurance for both the city and the Board of Field Officers, and other things about the city's authority and responsibility and the Board of Field Officers' responsibilities on Marion Square. It's not a simple matter just to say people can use Marion Square, and I'm glad that you've given this out because this will explain to people. Very few people know about this. The original of this was done in the year 2002. I was chairman at that time because we cycled through chairmanship. And a friend of all here, Paul Wieters, and I wrote the initial about how do we allow or disallow things to be done on Marion Square by the public use. So and this has evolved, this is the third generation of it. And this particular one is updated from this is 2021. It was updated from the 2015 version. With 2015 was Mayor Riley, 2021 was Mayor Tecklenburg, and there were improvements specifically and important needed information improvements each time. But go back, 1833, the Washington Light Infantry, the Sumter Guards, and other militia units, historic militia units, and they're not troublemakers. You can read all you want about them. They're not troublemakers. They, along with other militia units over time, named the officers to the Board of Field Officers of the 4th Brigade. The sole purpose of the Board of Field Officers of the 4th Brigade is to own Marion Square and cooperate with the city for its public use. Sole purpose in life. And we've done that since 1833. And there's a lot of history there that ties in with things that go on in the city in many, many aspects. You talk about the pre-war militia. There were many pre-war militia units. We're not militia units now. We're considered historic militia units, and there's only 2 left, Washington Light Infantry and the Sumter Guard. Again, they named the members to the Board of Field Officers. And we work with the city on a continuous basis, especially the staff of the city in the public use of Marion Square. We don't just wake up one morning and say, what are we going to do about Marion Square today? We deal with it every day.
You have a question?
Yes, sir.
Talk about how was it councils of church? Did they have any
Did they have what? Well, I don't know what the deal was. Yeah, the agreement at that point was
something called the civil war.
right. Yes, sir. But the Civil War did not disrupt the agreement from 1833. The 1833 agreement was in place, and it said that Marion Square had 2 purposes. It was left open for the militia units for practice and parade and ceremony, and it was made left open as a public mall, a public park, and managed by the city. And that's been the case since 1833. The Civil War did not disrupt that. Okay, that was the agreement. This other thing, this actual written.
If I may interject real quick,
Yes, there
if
was.
we could just make sure we're using our microphones when we're talking.
Okay.
No, I think we need to let Dale finish his talk first, since he was interrupted with the questions. So if you don't mind, just for a point of
I will
order.
be brief because I've made my points. The pre-war militia was a fact of life. Our military was militia. Now we are fraternal, social, historic militia units, and there's only 2 of us left, as I explained. There's nothing clandestine about how things are done on Marion Square. It was not done in the darkness of night to put the Robert E. Lee roadside marker on Marion Square, where it had been removed from another city property. And I shouldn't say another city property, but another property under the control of the city. It was removed by the city, and it was put with agreement, understanding by all parties that it would be put on Marion Square. It's not here to resurrect the Confederacy, as you suggested last meeting, and we talked about that respectfully together. And it was not put there for that reason, but it is a part of history. The purpose of the Board of Field Officers, as far as Marion Square is concerned, is to honor the military involvement of the state of South Carolina and her people, particularly in this case, the city of Charleston, people over the years who have served in the military. And we are here to continue to represent the military, the goodness of patriotism in this country. And for the time of the 4-year Civil War, there were 4 years of pride in the city and the military units that it supported.
United States military.
Yes, sir. We are, virtually all of us are veterans of the U.S. military. So we have not,
U.S. military, yes, sir.
yeah, well, I mean, this is the 21st century.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. But we do respect.
So,
Exactly, it's the
Thank you, Mr.
21st
Chairman.
century.
okay,
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah.
yeah. And so then, any other points before we adjourn? So, Wilmot, we can proceed next. Okay, second, any discussion? All in favor? Thank you all, and thank you for the public for your patience as well, too, and thank you for your input, everybody.